In this episode, I'll talk about a couple excerpts from my book. This time it'll be about lateral work and self-carriage. So here we go, episode 218, Random Book Excerpts. Hi, I'm Karen Rohlf, and welcome to Horse Training in Harmony. This podcast is about you making progress with your horse in a way that you both can love. It's about learning how to move and be in harmony. Because yes, you really can develop a horse to be both athletic and happy. When we show up as our best selves for our horses will show up for us. So let's get started. So today I'm going to pick a couple excerpts from my Dressage Naturally book, and I was having trouble deciding what to choose. So I found a random number picker website, and I'm just going to spin the dial and let it pick what pages I read from. So that might be fun. Before I get into that, though, I wanted to give another story about how smart Atomic is, which, again, isn't actually such a big deal because I think they're all smart, but I guess maybe this is a story about how smart I am for noticing how smart he is. So if you've followed along on a couple other things I talked about with him, with the ring, so this little rubber plastic foamy ring thing I have, and how he had an idea to put the ring on the hook, which I thought was pretty cool. Well, the other day, so that ring, that little hook, is up. It's kind of at like the height of my eyes. It's kind of up high on the wall. And when he's trying to put it on there, he will do it like a few times in a row where he's successful. But probably on average, he's only about like 50% successful, even when he's trying. So the other day, I was watching him over on our wash stall area. There's a kind of little half wall. It just sticks out a little bit, and it's about, I don't know, maybe chest high, maybe a little bit lower than that. And there's some hooks underneath that. And I saw him over there. There's a little towel hanging on the hook, and he knows how to take a towel off a hook because sometimes I hide things under towels, and he knows that game of like, take the towel off the hook because maybe there's the prize underneath it. Anyway, so I'm watching him, and he's taking the towel off the hook, kind of shaking it around, and then he's putting it on top of the top of the little wall thing. It's like maybe 6-inch wide, 6-inch by 1.5 feet, little section of wall sticking out. And so he's taking the towel off the hook, puts it on the wall, and then he was taking the towel and then just dropping it. And I go put it back on the hook. And so he was doing that for a little bit. And then I saw him taking the towel, he'd drop it on the ground, and before I could go pick it up, he'd pick it up and he put it on top of the wall, and then he dragged it down, and it would land on the hook. So I'm like watching, like, was that an accident or is he doing this on purpose? And so he'd take the towel, and then he'd put it from the hook, he'd take it off the hook, put it on top of the wall, and then he'd take it from the top of the wall and drag it down, and it would land on the hook again. So I'm like, okay, that looks on purpose. So I brought his little rubber ring over, and I put it on the ground, and he picked up the rubber ring, put it on top of the wall, and then dragged it down so it landed on the hook. And then he looks at me with his cute little face like, ta-da! And of course I give him a cookie. So I put it on the ground again, and he picks it up, he puts it on top of the wall, and then drags it down so it lands on the hook. And he did this multiple times in a row, and we've done it other days since then. And his success rate of actually managing to get the thing on the hook is like now up to probably 80% or even higher. I need to measure it, but that's the feeling I get, is like the vast majority of the time, he's able to land it on the hook. So it's almost like he's like, okay, I know I want it on the hook. I know I can get it on the hook, but with the hook up high like that, I'm just thinking he can't see it so well. And so he's looking around. He's like, there's hooks over here. And it's almost as if he practiced with the towel. And he's like, yeah, this is cool. I can just put it there and then just let it flop over the edge and it'll land on the hook. Anyway, I think that's pretty smart. And if nothing else, he found a new game to play and a new way to get cookies. So who's the smart one there? I certainly didn't train any of this. So anyway, so that's my newest story about, oh my God, Atomic is so smart. Anyway, okay, so I thought it might be fun to just, like I said, just pick a excerpt out of the book. I mean, it's a great source of endless information available in the Dressage Naturally shop, of course. So this book, is the book that I wrote when I tried to figure out, okay, what am I doing now when I'm combining all this, more partnership-based way of being with my horse, and I still want to do dressage with them. So I found a little website that is a number picker because I couldn't figure out, what page to read. So I thought, well, let me just randomize it. So I'm going to spin this thing and it's going to pick a page number and then we'll see what we get. Okay, the lucky number is 131. All right, let's go to the book. Let's see if I can get to page 131. Oops. Oh, the suspense, the suspense. You guys already know what the subject is because I mentioned it in the intro. Okay, page 131 is actually, it's a summary page. So what's it a summary of? Okay, it's a summary of, in section 2, exercises for lateral work, for mobilizing your horse, mobility exercises. All right, well, I will just read what's in the summary. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be stuff to discuss. Actually, this is kind of cool because I just wrapped up a whole series on lateral work simplified. It ended up being, I think, a really cool like 3-webinar series, and then we just did a Q&A about it. So anybody who's listening who just did that series, this will be a nice add-on to that. And and if anybody's hasn't done it, the recordings are still available. You won't be able to be on the live calls and ask any questions, but you can get all the recordings. So you can find that by going to dressagenaturally.net/sideways. See what I did there? And you should be able to still get all the recordings. If not, then it's expired and too late. But I'm pretty sure that should still work. So dressagenaturally.net/sideways. Okay, well, page 131 starts by saying summary. So a horse is mobile when he's easily able to displace his hindquarters, forequarters, or his whole body laterally. In order to achieve this, you must be able to, and then there's some bullet points. One is to be able to yield the hindquarters and forequarters easily and instantly in isolation. You need to be able to maintain gait and be aware of what may be interfering with this ability to be freely forward. You need to be able to direct the positions of the lateral movements and remain free-flowing with your seat. And you have to have a strong focus regarding line of travel. And I'll just keep reading and then we'll go back and discuss. There's just one more paragraph. So each of these must be at a high level in isolation before you attempt to combine them. Your horse becomes more mobile when he's able to execute these exercises while maintaining rhythm and balance. He'll also be more aligned and easier to ride straight. The more flexible the horse is, the easier the exercises of mobility will be. The more mobile the horse is, the easier it'll be to collect them. And before I talk about collection, though, let's learn about lengthenings. Lengthenings are a gymnastic prerequisite to the quality collection, to quality collection. Okay, and the next section is on lengthening. So yeah, so let's go back and just see what we can talk about this. So lateral work, there's just so many different words to describe the same thing. So lateral work, when I talk about lateral work, that usually means specific positions like shoulder and haunches and rhombers, half pass. So there's lots of times when I'll ask my horse to mobilize and to move their haunches here or there and be able to shift the shoulders, shift the haunches. And that's really building the prerequisites. And that's all still in the mobility category of exercises. So mobility just means you can displace your horse laterally. Can you put the shoulders more to one side than the haunches? How about the haunches more than the shoulders, to the right and left, front and back, all equally? And so that's all mobility kind of exercises. And within those exercises, there are the specific lateral positions. And if I'm going to say shoulder in, now I'm aiming for shoulder in, and it's a very specific move. So I try to use my language really carefully so that I make sure I know what I'm talking about, because sometimes I'm not going to be specific. And I'm like, hey, can you move your shoulders one step over there? Yay. And other times I'm going to be thinking, hey, it's shoulder in. And shoulder in is very specific, and it has some different criteria that all have to be there. Otherwise, it's not a shoulder in. Separate from that is and this is what we talked a lot about in the series that I just did on lateral work, is we can aim for the shoulder in, we can have the vision for the shoulder in, we can know exactly what we mean by that. And then we still have to have a forgiving process, right? So a process where I know I'm aiming for shoulder in, I have a very clear picture in my mind, and I'm still going to understand that there's going to be a little progress when it is a movement soon to be known as shoulder in. Right? Or an artist's rendition of a shoulder in. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm aiming for it, and we be forgiving along the way. And that I really highlight that because in saying that like a shoulder in is a very precise move, sometimes people sort of attack learning it by starting with trying to be perfect. And nobody's going to be perfect when you first start learning it, and then everyone's going to freeze up. So that's why it's so nice in the summary that the first bullet point is be able to yield the hindquarters and the forequarters easily and instantly in isolation. And that means, ideally, anytime, anywhere, at any gait, you can displace the haunches half a step to one side or the other, shoulders to one side or the other, whole horse to one side or the other, and it doesn't change anything else except that. So meaning, this is often easiest to see when you're halted. So pretend you're halted. You ask your horse's haunches to take one step to the left. The haunches take one step to the left, and they trickle forward 5 steps. So they did it, but not in isolation. They didn't only move their hindquarters, right? The whole horse fell out of balance or traveled somewhere. And it's really, really important that you take the time to figure out how to isolate it. That the horse goes, oh, I need to isolate only my hindquarters. Therefore, I need to sit up a little bit and control that my weight doesn't just roll like a ball down a hill in some other direction. Because that's going to have to be managed. If you're in the middle of lateral work and every time you ask the haunches to come in or out or whatever they need to go, and that causes the horse to also fall forward and accelerate, well, now you're going to need extra aids that are being used simply because the first aids didn't work in isolation. So really, really, really worth taking the time to get those isolated yields. Okay, so the second bullet point in this summary is you need to be able to maintain gait and be aware of what may be interfering with this ability. And so remember, each of these is happening inside doing lateral work, but you want to practice it in isolation. So just in general, how's the maintaining of gait going? And by maintaining gait, you can also include in there maintaining like exactly the gait, right? So if so many times horses get stuck and lose energy during lateral work. Well, I'd say, well, how is that maintaining of energy in general? Does yours kind of wind down even just on a straight line with loose reins? So to just check that you're able to, the horse has a responsibility a little bit to, maybe not responsibility, but they're like, oh, I get it. We're cantering now and we're going to keep cantering. Or I get it. We're trotting now. We're going to keep trotting. And you've played the game of when you set the kind of tone and the energy level and the tempo, those things are all different, but in the same kind of category. Can your horse kind of hook into it? Of course, you have to be participating in this also, right? So maybe the thing that's interfering with your horse's ability to maintain the exact quality of gait is the way you're sitting, right? It could be too floppy or too tight or off to the side, or you didn't realize you were actually holding back. So just in general, outside of lateral movements, you want to pay attention to the maintenance of gait and that quality of the gait, and be really super aware of what might be interfering with that ability. Right? If your horse is maybe they're speeding up. Are they speeding up because they're falling like a ball rolling down a hill, or is it because they're tense? Because whatever it is, it's going to happen more in the lateral work. Tense horses get more tense, low energy horses get more low energy because it's a challenge. Okay, so the third bullet point, be able to be able to direct these positions and maintain free flowing with your seat, right? So as we talked about in this series that I just did, what's the aid for the lateral positions? The aids for the lateral positions is you sit in the lateral position, right? And we often, if you go to a book and read, like, what are the aids for renvers, you're going to have a paragraph at least of aids to use, right? This leg creates the bend. This hand blocks the shoulder from falling out. This hand creates the bend. The outside leg keeps the hunches from swinging out. And then you got to energize, and then you put your hip there, and you put it gets really tangled up quickly. So in simplifying it, just put your shoulders where you want your horse's shoulders, put your haunches where you want your horse's haunches. That's it. So let's start there. Sometimes we need other aids to help and to clarify and refine, but the fundamental aid is always do in your body what you want your horse to do. So you've got to be able to put yourself in that position and remain free-flowing with your seat. So in that lateral work series we just did, and you can find this in the book and random videos in the classroom too, but we practice really putting ourselves in the position. We practice some different isolations of moving our top half without our bottom half and our bottom half without our top half. We did this with and without riding a pool noodle at the same time, until that can get really smooth and you can find your active neutral where you can be in that position, use exactly the muscles you need to hold that position and maintain it, and embody, confirm, and allow, and you're not using one drop of muscle tension that you don't need. So can you go into those positions and remain free-flowing with your seat? A lot of times when you practice going into those positions, even on the pool noodle schoolmaster, it's easy to find that you tense up a butt cheek, or you bring one shoulder up to your ear, or you tense your jaw, and everything's connected. So making sure, it's not always the horse's fault. We have to be able to go into those positions in our body easily and clearly without any contortion. Okay, and the last bullet point, have a strong focus regarding line of travel. Yeah, I mean, that's in general, and yeah, you want to be able to at any time teach your horse to follow your focus. So I do this a lot in my program, whether it's riding corner to corner or point to point, that this is an exercise I've practiced all by itself in easy circumstances, is like, hey, I'm looking at that barrel or that tree. Let's go straight to that tree. And I'm not going to hold you there. I'm not going to take you there. I'm just going to point there, and I'll let you know when you're off course. So that's easiest just kind of going down on a nice, straight line with the fence next to you or something. But more challenging under the doing a lateral position, because doing a lateral position, the way you're riding it and the precision of the line is what gives you the gymnastic benefit. And if you're in that position, but you're not holding your line of travel and the horse is kind of leaking a little sideways, then they're not getting the full gymnastic value, right? They're cheating a little bit. And that's their job, to cheat, right? Our job is to ask them to do squats in the gym, and their job is to see if they don't have to do squats in the gym. Nobody wants to do squats in the gym. But if we ride it well enough, we can get some good reps in where they really are in the position where they are engaging and they are suppling their shoulders or whatever it is that's happening in that movement. But your ability to hold your line of travel has to be really high. Otherwise, they're always wiggling out of it. And you can do 100 repetitions, 100 long sides of a shoulder in that's slightly drifting, and you're going to get less benefit than if you do half a long side where every step is exactly on that line of travel. So yeah, that's something. Focus, practice it, focus on it, make sure your horse can follow the focus during something easy. And then you have it in your pocket for when you need it, when it is a challenge. Okay. Ta-da. That was that. All right. Let's do another one. All right. Let me get out the little spinner thing. Kind of a ridiculous little sound there, but it's festive. All right, it picked page 25. All right, let's get to page 25. Way at the other end of the book. Hang on. Oh, it's in part 1. There we go. Okay. Oh, one of my absolutely favorite subjects. Self-carriage. All right, so this is just like a half a page here. And it's called Self-Carriage, Making Neutral Feel Good. And actually, this is cool because it'll really connect to what I was just saying with lateral work. So you guys got 2 of the best parts. Okay. Story time. All right, it says, even when we're leading our horses towards better balance and biomechanics, we must have a degree of leaving them alone. If you want to help a child learn to ride a bicycle, you have to let go of the bike. You stay close, so if they lose their balance, you can help them keep from falling on their faces, but you must let go. You trust that the child will feel where the best balance is, and you set them up to be able to find it and feel it. If you never let go, they don't find it, and you must always hold the bike. It's the same with horses. Balance and harmony will feel good, especially to the horse. They can absolutely feel it and maintain it themselves, but only if we let go of them. We must from the beginning develop the system of trust. We must lead them as best we can and be ready to adjust if they fall out of balance. Instead of keeping the outside leg on to keep the haunches from swinging out, sit in alignment with the movement, and if the horse's haunches fall out, remind him, then go back to being in neutral for the moment. Be there as a leader, but as much as possible like a ghost. Ask for it, get it, and then go to neutral. Distinguish between the position you must be in to clearly communicate what movement you want and all the other aids needed if the first set of aids don't work. Being in neutral and self-carriage is something in between giving no information and leave your horse wondering what to do, and micromanaging him every step of the way, leaving him feeling helpless. Often I see riders having difficulty with self-carriage because, and here's some bullet points, the initial balance is off, there's too much tension to begin with, or the first set of aids never really worked. You can check this by going to neutral and releasing the reins or legs for a moment and seeing what falls apart. If the horse only adds some energy into a yield, and then the rest of the energy goes into brace or escape, you're going to have trouble with self-carriage. And the other bullet point is riders can have difficulty with self-carriage because the emotions are not calm. Stand still and drop the reins. This is physically the easiest circumstance for your horse to have self-carriage. Check that he is mentally, emotionally, and physically in balance with you here. Subtle versions of lack of self-carriage can hide during movement, but it can show up at the halt. Yeah, good stuff. I highly recommend this book. So let's see, what else can I say about that? I think connected to what I was just saying about the lateral work and having all those pieces and having that aid, if the aid is the positioning that we go into, like there we go, we're in that positioning, we can use our legs and our reins to kind of help, right? So the horse, we can go in the positioning and the horse is like, what does that mean? And so then you can help. It's like, hey, and use the reins as part of this connection of our body to their body, and give them a hint, right? So the reins can be a good tool to say, hey, this is all connected. When my shoulders turn and then my arms are there, my reins are there, and I'm connected softly to your head in some way, then I can very precisely tell you exactly, make a suggestion of where to put your head, and hopefully it makes sense with the rest of the body and the way my thighs are positioned going down into my lower leg. It all makes sense, right? So if I move my haunches and my horse doesn't move their haunches, I'll use my leg to say, and come with me. And then the neutral part is where I'm remaining in that position, but I relax my lower leg and I'm not actively holding with my hands. I can put a loop in the reins for a moment and test that the reins have indicated something, but they're not relying on those reins to hold there. So this is the tricky part of having a connection with your horse without holding them together. I mean, that's one of the trickiest parts of riding in connection. It's easy to not hold them if the reins aren't there, but to be in that beautiful all-is-one connection and still have self-carriage, that's the challenge. So very, very important that we have to let go of that bicycle analogy, right? So we let go of the bicycle, but we're still there. We're still close until we know that the horse has their skills. That's kind of how I see it, especially, during anything, but that lateral work position is really good. Like really feel like there's you sitting in that position, and it's almost like your reins and your lower leg are like your parent that comes along and fixes things if you're about to fall on your face. And, nope, keep those haunches over there. And then that lower leg relaxes so that you're positioning your body can just continue to be the system that's telling him what to do. Yeah, so self-carriage, making neutral feel good, right? And so in that neutral place where we're just sitting there in the positioning, that's more comfortable. It's giving more comfort to the horse than automatically saying shoulder in equals one leg on at the girth, one leg on behind the girth, one inside rein pulling the nose in for the bend, and the other outside rein holding the shoulder. Like, that's a lot of aids that are just on because someone told you to put them on. If the aid for shoulder in is just be in that position, be in a shoulder in, and then only use an aid when you need to help. Remember, that's why aids are called aids, because they're supposed to help. So they help, they get the thing done, and then they can let go. So that in the position, in that work, that moment of physical demand, it's also more comfortable to the horse. So we don't just the constant theme of not using your aids to constantly try to hold things together and control things. You've got to let go, and finding that way of letting go without disappearing. So I mentioned somewhere about, being a ghost. It's a ghost doing the thing you're doing, right? So the ghost is still there. Like, I'm doing a shoulder in, I'm a ghost doing a shoulder in. But when I relax and go to neutral, I don't disappear completely and go, haha, guess what I'm supposed to be doing? No, you're very strong, have a very strong intention of what you're doing. You're just trying to be the movement and not use those legs and arms too much. All right, so what did I say in these bullet points? Difficulty with self-carriage. Yeah, there's too much, the initial balance is off. There's too much tension to begin with. So this is, I think I'm talking mostly here about like when you're doing something, if you're out of balance and you're, leaning on each other and supporting each other just to trot down the long side, shoulder in, learning shoulder in and adding even more aids, might be harder to be in self-carriage if you're not in a good, if the easy stuff isn't easy and nice and harmonious, then making things harder often does not improve things. It can. If I'm on a really unbalanced horse, I might do a shoulder in or something like that in order to gain balance. But even before that, there's not going to be too much tension because I'm not going to be fighting with the horse. So when I write, if there's too much tension to begin with, it's usually because like during something simple, there's already conflict. And so in that last bullet, when I say, stand still and drop the reins, I've taught lessons where that's where we start. Someone's come in for help with their canter pirouettes and they have constant contact pulling on a double bridle just to keep halted. So I shouldn't laugh, but it's funny when you think about it this way. So if I'm seeing that you need a ton of pressure on, with 2 bits and 2 reins to stay still at the halt and keep your horse from walking off, that's a self-carriage problem. And I'm not going to try to solve it during something physically demanding like a canter pirouette. I'm going to try to solve it during something simple, like just standing there. And, and the only reason for that to be there is because of emotions, right? So horses typically don't fall down at the halt. And if they are falling down and drifting away and going weird places, it's usually emotional. And we've got to address that. Like that's just a starting point. If your horse is always feeling like they want to be somewhere other than where you are right here underneath you, self-carriage is going to be difficult. And again, some of these things can hide in motion, where if you do them at the halt, it's really obvious, right? So having a horse who's always trying to get like half a mile an hour faster than what you're doing, or 2 degrees to the left of where you are, if you're moving, that can be harder to see. But if you're standing still, if you want to stand still and your horse is not standing still, that's pretty obvious. Okay, and then that middle bullet point again. Difficulty with self-carriage because the first set of aids never really worked. That's a big one, right? That we're putting aids on. It's a little bit like what I talked about in the last thing with the isolation. Like I put an aid on to yield a hindquarters, and maybe I said, okay, I'm picturing one giant step to the left of the hindquarters, and the horse gives me half a little step to the left and a bunch of falling forward through the opposite shoulder. So, how can I have self-carriage if now I have to add my reins to stop that shoulder from moving, right? So, if the first set of aids, if the request for the hindquarter step worked in isolation, then I wouldn't need to add any other aids. So how can I ever be in self-carriage when I ask my horse's hind end to step under if that request causes a need for more aids somewhere else? That makes sense? So really you have to be a real diagnostician and thinking about every aid that you're using, and is it an appropriate request, right? That's number one. Is what you're asking fair, reasonable, and possible? And then to really practice these in refinement, so you really keep track of when am I adding an aid and then needing to add another aid to fix the problem that happened when I put the first aid on. And you can see how this can compound, right? You ask your horse to step under with that inside hind. They kind of did, but they also fell out through the outside shoulder. So now you have to add that outside hand. Oh, and now they're getting sticky and slowing down because that outside hand is now on. So now you're going to have to add some inside leg to keep them going. Oops, now they're off the line of travel. So you better add some of that other rein also. And now it's all a tangled mess. So we do not want to get stuck in this kind of cycle. So actually, this is really cool. The universe did a great job picking a couple numbers today, because those two subjects are very interwoven. They're good by themselves and they're totally interwoven. So I hope you enjoyed random book excerpts from Karen. And again, you can find the book in the shop, which you can get to from my website, dressagenaturally.net. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And and just take a chance. If you really want to dive into lateral work, go ahead and take a chance at that dressagenaturally.net/sideways. And we usually like to keep these things available even after we've run it live. So you can you can see everything and you can listen to the questions. And you might find that super valuable how I broke it all down into a very simple protocol for learning lateral work. All right, go out and enjoy your amazingly smart and cute horses.